Chapter 4. Hear the word of the Lord, ye children of Israel, for the Lord hath a controversy with the inhabitants of the land, because there is no truth, nor mercy, nor knowledge of God in the land. By swearing and lying and killing and stealing and committing adultery they break out, and blood toucheth blood. Therefore shall the land mourn, and every one that dwelleth therein shall languish, with the beasts of the field, and with the fowls of heaven, yea, the fishes of the sea also shall be taken away. Yet let no man strive, nor reprove one another, for thy people are as they that strive with the priest. Therefore shalt thou fall in the day, and the prophet also shall fall with thee in the night, and I will destroy thy mother. My people are destroyed for lack of knowledge, because thou hast rejected knowledge. I will also reject thee, that thou shalt be no priest to me. Seeing thou hast forgotten the law of thy God, I will also forget thy children. As they were increased, so they sinned against me. Therefore will I change their glory into shame. They eat up the sin of my people, and they set their heart on their iniquity. And there shall be like people, like priests, and I will punish them for their ways, and reward them for their doings. For they shall eat and not have enough, they shall commit whoredom and shall not increase, because they have left off to take heed to the Lord. Whoredom and wine and new wine take away the heart. My people ask counsel, let their stocks and their staff declareth unto them. For the spirit of whoredoms hath caused them to err, and they have gone a-whoring from under their God. They sacrifice upon the tops of the mountains, and burn incense upon the hills, under oaks and poplars and elms, because the shadow thereof is good. Therefore your daughters shall commit whoredom, and your spouses shall commit adultery. I will not punish your daughters when they commit whoredom, nor your spouses when they commit adultery. For themselves are separated with whores, and they sacrifice with harlots. Therefore the people that doth not understand shall fall. Though thou, Israel, play the harlot, yet let not Judah offend, and come not ye unto Gilgal, neither go ye up to Bethaven, nor swear the Lord liveth. For Israel slideth back as a backsliding heifer. Now the Lord will feed them as a lamb in a large place. Ephraim is joined to idols, let him alone. Their drink is sour, they have committed whoredom continually, her rulers with shame do love. Give ye. The wind hath bound her up in her wings, and they shall be ashamed because of their sacrifices. Here in chapter 4, we have an interesting concept, which we've discussed actually at least twice before. Basically, it says, therefore shalt the land mourn. Now, if you, and I don't expect you to remember, but in Leviticus chapter 26 and Deuteronomy chapter 28, the Lord discusses with Israel how, if they are righteous or wicked, their personal righteousness or their personal wickedness will have a direct impact on whether or not the land yields its bounties. If they're righteous, the Lord can unlock the land, and it can yield up just enormous amounts of food, more than they would ever get because of any skill on their part. And if they were wicked, that they would have very little to show for all of their effort, maybe even not as much as they grain on their farm as they sowed for seed. So it was important that they be personally righteous if they wanted the land to yield its bounty. In verse 8, it says, they eat up the sin of my people. There's an error in the translation there. The translation should be, they eat up the sin offering of my people. And what this meant, really, was that the priests wanted to get. Now, when there were sin offerings, the priest was supposed to offer some of it on the altar, but they also had to eat some of it. And this was meat that had fat on it. And meat with fat on it tasted good and was rare. And according to what the meaning of this is that the priests would encourage, would hope for an increase of the sin among the people, so that the people would bring more sin offerings, so that the priests would have more of the really good meat to eat for themselves. A really wonderful reason to want people to be sinful, right? In verse 12, it talks about the stalks and the staffs. The stalks was a name given to the wooden idols. that they had, the ones they carved themselves to represent Baal or whoever they were worshiping that week. The staff was like a divining rod that people would use for finding water or finding things that had been lost, or for telling the future, or telling the difference between something that was good and something that was bad, somebody was lying, somebody was telling the truth. They had these sticks that they would use, and they would, water witching, whatever. And all of this was a counterfeit by Satan, so that people would use these things instead of praying to the living God for any kind of guidance. Now, in verse 15, it says to stay away from Gilgal and Bethaven. Gilgal was the first place, was the place actually on the west side of the Jordan River where Israel reconsecrated themselves after they crossed the Jordan River. It was the spot where circumcision was reinstated amongst the people, and it was supposed to be a highly righteous spot, place that they could go and make new covenants, worship, whatever. However, it had been so polluted from the time of one of the prior kings with idol worship that, according to the Lord, it was best to stay away from there. It might have been a righteous place in the past, but it sure wasn't it then. Bethaven is a play on words, and the word Bethel meant house of the Lord. Bethaven meant the house of iniquity. And so here he was saying that although Bethel, house of God, had at one point been a righteous place, now it wasn't the house of God anymore, it was the house of iniquity, and therefore it was a place to be avoided because it was now the home of idols. In verse 16, it talks about the backsliding heifer. I've had a backsliding heifer. A heifer is an unbred cow that is not giving milk. If it's a dairy cow, or a cow that has not had a calf. And a backsliding heifer is basically an unmanageable animal. Now, normally a heifer should be docile, and you'd be able to lead her about and take her to wherever she needs to go, and she's not going to fight you, not going to be in trouble. But a backsliding heifer is one that gives you nothing but grief, nothing but trouble. You can't lead her anywhere. She's going to try and run away all the time, try and get out of any fenced area, whatever. And totally an unmanageable animal, and that's how Israel was, an unmanageable nation of rebellious, hard-hearted people. The description of a lamb in a large place, a lamb, of course, is a very small animal. A very small animal in a large place would be if you were to see a huge field with one lamb in it, and that was all that was in the field. You would understand the analogy as meaning that this little lamb was lost in a very large area. There was no shelter, no protection for it from any of the elements. And this basically is symbolic of Israel, the nation of Israel, the 10 northern tribes, 10.5 tribes actually, being scattered amongst all the Gentiles all over the face of the earth. There would be no protection for them, and there would just be a few of them scattered here and there. In verse 17, and again through in several places in chapter 5, it talks about Ephraim, which is one of the tribes of Israel, and Judah, which is another one of the tribes, but doesn't mention the other tribes. There are basically 10 other whole tribes, and then there's then there's Manasseh, which is sort of Ephraim and Manasseh are a pair, but they're counted as two separate ones, but in some ways of talking about it. And the reason that Ephraim and Judah are discussed is Ephraim was representative of and the leader of the northern kingdom, and Judah was basically with almost everything of the southern kingdom. So if it talks about Ephraim, it's talking about the northern kingdom, talking about Judah, talking about the southern kingdom.